Hello everyone, today's video is about vaccines for teens. So you may already realize this, and if not, I hope to explain it succinctly today, that teens are due for some routine vaccinations that are now required for public school attendance. So, you know, before kindergarten, your child would have received the standard childhood immunization schedule, and there are 4 required before kindergarten starts. They're Tdap, polio, which my current practice offers those put together in Kindrix, and MMR, measles, mumps, rubella, and varicella, chickenpox, which there's also a combo for that called ProQuad. So it's either 2 or 4 vaccines, depending on how your practice does it. Either way is fine. But after that kindergarten vaccination, then they really aren't due for any until middle school, other than their yearly flu vaccine. So for middle school, we had always said you have to have these before you go to middle school, but then the rule, at least here in North Carolina, was clarified a bit, and they have to be done before the 7th grade officially, and most middle schools are 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. So we start offering them as soon as they're 11 years old, and these teen vaccines, the 2 required ones are Tdap, that stands for tetanus, diphtheria, and acellular pertussis. Tetanus, of course, is necessary about every 10 years, but it needs to have been within 5 years if you have an active some kind of puncture wound injury. And then the diphtheria in there is primarily as an adjuvant to help improve the immunogenicity or the antibody production. And then the A before the P in Tdap is because the pertussis we now use is an acellular product. Long time ago, when it was a whole cell, an entire cell pertussis, it was much more likely to generate a febrile response or a fever after the vaccine. So this is Tdap, acellular pertussis. In fact, it's that pertussis component that many years ago made this become a mandatory vaccine before 7th grade. The reason is, if we can get this audience, these middle schoolers, all vaccinated, it will help them as well to boost their antibodies against pertussis, because this is one of those tricky things through the years. It's hard to get a vaccine to boost the antibody response enough that it lasts. It just seems to wane over time. And so that's why going forward, one day when they're adults themselves and having babies, now pregnant women, it's recommended that they receive the Tdap vaccine with every single pregnancy. So that's interesting. So we do recommend that they get it before 7th grade. In fact, it's required, so that if they don't catch pertussis, not only will that help them, they won't have the infection, but they also won't be able to give it to a newborn, and you know pertussis can be fatal in newborns. So that's the reason for the Tdap. So around age 11, and then they wouldn't be due again as far as routine until around 21, which is about when their time at our pediatric office is expiring. And then, so Tdap is required, and it's just a one-time thing at 11. There are no specific boosters for that while they're still in our care, unless they've had a puncture injury and it's been more than 5 years since their tetanus. A lot of teens will report that the tetanus vaccine, and adults report this too, leave them just a little achy at the injection site, so you can expect that. We don't recommend taking Tylenol or ibuprofen before the visit, but after the visit, if it's very achy and they don't have a reason not to use ibuprofen, it would be acceptable and could help with some of that mild achiness at the injection site. The other one that's required before 7th grade, the brand name we use is Monatra. It's a bacterial meningitis vaccine, and there is a booster for that at age 16. So that's the vaccine that can help prevent them from catching and dying from bacterial meningitis. Obviously, that's important because bacterial meningitis is quite contagious and can be fatal. Many colleges are now also requiring the 2-dose series of Monatra, so 11 and 16. Now, there is a 3rd vaccine that so far is not required but absolutely recommended, and that's the Gardasil Vaccine that protects against human papillomavirus. There is a specific video about that individual vaccine because it's so important. We've already noted decreased rates of cervical cancer in women in their 20s. But if you're the parent of a son, and you may be wondering, but why does my son also need this protection against human papillomavirus, or HPV, that causes cervical cancer? It's because HPV causes many other mucous membrane cancers as well: mouth, throat, tongue, penile, perirectal, rectal, that sort of thing. And so it can actually help protect your son against future cancers caused by the HPV virus as well. So Gardasil is also one of the teen vaccines recommended at that 11-year-old well visit. So at the 11-year-old check, they should be receiving Tdap, Monatra, and Gardasil. And if it's flu season, the flu vaccine. Now, Gardasil does need a booster. I usually do it at the following yearly checkup. And if they begin the series before age 15, there are only 2 doses total. If they begin the series after age 15, then there are 3 doses total. And now it's licensed up to a much older use, way beyond my age range. I think it's 45 years old. We highly recommend the Gardasil vaccine. So that covers the 3 at the 11-year well. And then at the 12-year, they could get the booster of Gardasil. At the 16-year, the booster of Monatra. Now, beginning at age 16, but sometimes we do it at age 17 and 18-year well checks, there is a, not brand new by any means, but newer vaccine, an additional protection against bacterial meningitis, specifically meningococcal B serotypes. So it's called Trumimba is the brand name, and you may have seen this one actually advertised. It's also a series of 2. And so I typically, if they can tolerate it, we could do the Monatra and the Min B at the same visit at 16 and then do the booster to Min B at the 17-year well. If they only want to do 1 each year, we could do Monatra at 16, Min B 1 at 17, and Min B 2 at the 18-year well visit. It would be ideal to get both of the meningitis vaccine coverages just so in the future, if they were ever around those germs, they wouldn't be susceptible to them. Particularly, we worry about teens who are going to be in confined spaces with a lot of other people, so a dorm situation or the military situation with a lot of other soldiers in close quarters. So that's just a quick rundown on the teen vaccines. I hope that answered a few questions for you. Many teens are nervous about shots, needles in general, and we appreciate that, and we try to talk them through it and get them to relax their muscles when they're receiving the vaccine so it won't be as sore later, to use their arms afterwards so it won't be as sore later. But it is required for school and for good reason, and we would highly recommend it. And I hope that answered some of your questions. If you guys have any additional video ideas or questions, feel free to leave them in the comments and I will try to address them. Hope this was helpful. Thanks.